Good evening, everybody. Hi. Today's topic that we will be taking up. Good evening, Lakshita. Today's topic that I'll be taking up here is we'll be continuing with the last area only. In the last class, now we discussed two things. About the supremacy of the Indian Constitution, how it is supreme, and how the legal sovereignty lies in the Constitution, and how people are the ultimate source of power. That was discussed, and how even after getting independence, India did not get the real independence until it became a republic in 1950. So this was that we had discussed in the last class. We will be moving forward with this historical background. So the title of the class that we have today is we will be taking up with the historical background only, from what really happened in the British era, or what is exactly the story in making of the Constitution of India. How did the Constituent Assembly rather started making the Constitution for itself? So when was the first time that people of the country decided that we need to have a constitution? So before that, I'll just share my screen with you. Okay. Yes. All right. So when we are speaking of the Indian story, we can I wish to quote Mahatma Gandhi here, who in rather 1992, 1922, sorry, who in 1922 who generally said that if you are speaking of Swaraj in India, then it is something that is the people who will get it for themselves. That Mahatma Gandhi in 22 somewhere spoke of a demand with his speeches. He gave a demand for constitution, back in 1922. So he said that if the constitution is made for India, it should be made by Indian people. Okay, that was his idea, and not the British Parliament. So he has quoted something by saying that Swaraj in India will not be a gift of the British Parliament. It will be the declaration of India's self, expression. It will be India's full self expression. It will be done by themselves. The people will actually speak of it. Then you can speak of individual instances. If we are talking here, to begin with, in 1935, rather, after uh, the Indian National Congress, they had asserted of making a separate constitution for India. Okay, we need a constitution for ourselves, which is not made by any outside interference. So 1935 can be this another landmark. Specifically, any leaders from Indian National Congress, when Jawaharlal Nehru, he actually called for a demand. So it was a demand that he said for creation of a constituent assembly. So if I quote him, he actually he said that the work of the Indian National Congress is to create India into a independent and a democratic state. So, and for that, they said that for these things, for being independent, for being democratic, you need to have a constitution, and that constitution shall only be made when India is free. So free India's constitution the demands have been made number of times. Okay, there are instances of individual people, say Mahatma Gandhi in 1920s, in 30s Pandit Nehru, the Indian National Congress in 1930s. But when was the first time we speak of, okay, when exactly was the first time that people of country, or they really asked for some kind of the constitution, that they really demanded for the constituent assembly. So if we have to start with this story, we can say कि जो इंडिया के independence की demand है, the independence demand started in the early 20th century. We know that. Okay, but the demand of the constituent assembly, demand for creating constitution, the demand of constitution, you can say, was formally in in the country, officially was provided in the NEHRU report. ठीक है, ये नेहरू रिपोर्ट थी 1928 की, और लाहौर सेशन ऑफ INC, Indian National Congress, in 1929. So ये generally these two places, the Nehru Report and the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress of 1928 and 1929, is generally said to have given a formal demand for India's constitution, which shall be made by people of India who will comprise of the Constituent Assembly. पर क्या इससे पहले कभी भी इंडिया में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में किसी ने नहीं बोला था? Did no one ever speak about this? So here there is an interesting thing. So 1857 में, 1857 is something which is important from the fact कि ये first war of independence इसको बोलते हैं. Okay. Now, at this time, the mutiny, or the first war of independence against the Britishers, जो कि Indian rebellion भी इसको कहते हैं history में, 1857, या the first revolt of independence. So these people were actually, revolting against the British colonial Raj. So they had certain challenges, and they were doing it for their own reasons. They had their political reasons, economic reasons. So इनकी एक demand ये भी थी कि they wanted the Mughal Empire to get restored in India. Okay, and they wanted Bahadur Shah Zafar. तो जो Bahadur Shah Zafar है, जो थे Bahadur Shah Zafar Bahadur Shah II, जो ये एम्परर थे, इसको ये रिवाइव करना चाहते थे, एंड दे वांटेड टू रिवाइव मुगल empire. Okay, so initially, even before the Nehru Report, even before the Lahore session, it was somewhere within the aspiration of these sepoys that they wish to had independence for themselves. They wanted the Mughal Empire, as we were before the coming of Britishers in the country. They wanted the empire to actually, be the sovereign ruler of India, and they wanted to, self-govern themselves, and they wanted to have an administration that was only of their own people. Indigenous administration की ये बात करते हैं. However, we know that it was not a formal picture. So this rebellion was suppressed, of course, by the Britishers. But the first war of independence, or the revolt of 1857, has its own, mark in history. It was actually a turning point in India's fight for its independence, and it was a turning point for the demand of self-governance. So formally speaking, in history books, ya fir, in political science books, you would say ki generally for the first time it was by the freedom fighters, the modern age freedom fighters, Nehru and his team and Indian National Congress at Lahore, जिसने Constituent Assembly की demand करी थी या Constitution की demand करी थी, but it actually happened, somewhere at the time of the first war of independence, and the impact is that this is still very important from the point of understanding India's independence or the constitution of independent India. So we will actually start with what happened post the Nehru report. So the story begins something like that कि भाई why particularly 1928, okay, or what was the idea of the Nehru report. So we'll start with Nehru report and then we'll follow the various milestones, or you can say the landmarks or the timeline which has led to the making of the Indian Constitution. So 1928 and 29, the Nehru report or the Lahore session rather. ठीक है, तो first time इन्होंने formally it raised in India for the first time at Calcutta. The Nehru report, this happened at Calcutta. This happened at Calcutta. So here, this committee, which was chaired by Motilal Nehru, who is father of the former Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. अब ये committee का ये Nehru report बनाने का objective ये था कि we will create a constitution. Okay. So during the session, a committee which was chaired by Motilal Nehru. So this committee formulated a document seeking for the Constitution of India. Okay? This Nehru committee, which presented its report, the report which was presented by this Nehru committee is known as the Nehru Report, which we are discussing right now. Fine. So ये इन्होंने August 1928 में present करी Nehru Report. Now, what did the Nehru report actually wanted? A proposal में क्या था कि भाई आप हमको dominion status provide कीजिए, okay? आप dominion status to India provide करें under the British Empire. Fine. I hope it is clear. Okay, to understand dominion status, you can go through the last class videos if you want. The second video speaks of what is the dominion status of India particularly. We've done it, in an elaborate manner there. So they asked for dominion status to India under the British Empire, and कि एक responsible government आप तैयार कीजिए. Responsible government we require, मतलब self-government with a federal structure. Okay. And lastly, we need a constituent assembly. We need a constituent assembly. Why do we need a constituent assembly? Because in order to self-govern ourselves, we would require a document which was significant. तो भाई नेहरू रिपोर्ट ने कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली बनाना रेकमेंड किया, और उसने क्या काम करना था कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली ने? who will make a constitution which will be a document about basic rules and regulations, which will explain who will have supremacy and which will explain how the government will be made. So these were the recommendations particularly. Okay, so other than this, generally when we are speaking of the history or the making, we are concerned about 3-4 things. Fine. The history or the story of creation of the Indian Constitution comes up, or it starts with Nehru Report. Okay. इसके अंदर इसके बाद 1928 से ये शुरू होता है और 1947 इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट तक जाता है. ठीक है. उसके बाद हम आ जाते हैं जनरली एक सेकंड पार्ट के ऊपर, which is about after the Constituent Assembly is made. Okay. Now, when the Constituent Assembly was made finally, okay, तो ये it met 9th of December 1946 for the first time. तो उसके बाद there was an objective resolution. So there was an objective resolution which was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru कि भाई you know what will be the broad principles of our new constitution. So the objective resolution was passed. So this is another milestone. The third one is the drafting committee of the constitution. Okay, headed by B.R. Ambedkar. Fine. And the fourth one, I'll write the fourth one here. The fourth one is the constitutional debates. Okay. This lecture में we are only concerned with the first point. What happened from the NEHRU report until the independence of India. So 1947 तक Constituent Assembly तो बन गई थी, but of course the assembly was in process because the constitution actually got adopted on 1949, 26th of November. So what is the story behind, you know, in reality, the making of the Indian Constitution? So when we are speaking of this story, we start with something known as the Crips Mission. ठीक है. अब ये Crips Mission की हम बात क्यों करते हैं? I'll just make a new page. Wait. So we'll start with Crips Mission particularly. So why Crips Mission? So why Crips Mission? See, Crips Mission of 1942. Okay. Now, Crips Mission of 1942 क्या है कि see, at this time the Britishers were within a crisis. They had a crisis of the Second World War. ठीक है. The colonies of British, they were actually, you know, under threat from Japan. ठीक है. तो Axis powers से Britishers को काफी threat था, and they wanted the support of their colonies in order to win the war. So the idea was कि आप हमारी Second World War में help करो, which happened from 1939 to 45. कि आप हमारी Second World War में थोड़ी help करो और हम आपको in return we'll give you certain status of self-governance. ठीक है, and you know, we'll give you certain political concessions. This was the idea. So the Crips Mission in India was sent by the British government during World War II. तो 1942 में जब वर्ल्ड वॉर चल रहा था तब ये इंडिया में भेजा गया ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट से, और दे सेंट स्टैनफोर्ड क्रिप्स टू इंडिया. ये एक ब्रिटिश पॉलिटिशियन था. He was sent, and his goal was, you know, to resolve the political deadlock in the country, asking in return for India's cooperation in war. ठीक है. तो अब ये आज से पहले ब्रिटिशर्स इस बारे में कोई बात नहीं कर रहे थे, but because the government in British, you know, was actually in threat of World War II, and they were forced to actually give India certain concessions, तो उन्होंने ये ऐसा करके एक मिशन इंडिया में भेजा. तो इससे पहले what was the background in Britain at that time was कि in 1940 England में there was a coalition government, ठीक है. So this coalition government in England, it actually recognized this particular principle कि भाई Indians should govern themselves, okay, and they should frame a new constitution for autonomous India. And जब मार्च में 1942 में they were actually, under pressure from Japan. So they sent this Stanford Crips, a member of the Britain cabinet. अब ये क्या लेकर आया, एक प्रपोजल लेकर आता है ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट का, जो कहते हैं कि भाई ये प्रपोजल अगर आप हमारी वॉर में हेल्प करते हो तो वी विल अडॉप्ट दिस एट द एंड ऑफ द वॉर, प्रोवाइडेड कि इंडिया की जो दो मेजर पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज हैं, the two major political parties provided in India, which is the Congress and the Muslim League, they accept the agreement or they accept the proposal of the Crips Mission. Okay, so what was the proposal? Actually, the Crips Mission idea was कि भाई help us in war, and if INC and Muslim League agree, then we can provide you with certain things. Okay, but if you will have to come on an agreement with the proposal. अब proposal इनका देखिए किस तरह का proposal था कि भाई हम इंडिया का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन फ्रेम कर देंगे एक इंडियन पीपल से बनी हुई कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली के थ्रू, दैट द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कैन बी framed by Indian people, ठीक है, through constituent assembly. Secondly, ये इंडिया को डोमिनियन स्टेटस प्रोवाइड करेगा, ओके, इंडिया को, मतलब कंप्लीट इंडिया, वी आर नॉट स्पीकिंग ऑफ इंडिया पाकिस्तान येट, तो इक्वल डोमिनियन स्टेटस प्रोवाइड करेगा, इक्वल पार्टनरशिप प्रोवाइड करेगा ब्रिटिश कॉमनवेल्थ नेशंस के साथ, ठीक है, और there shall be one India, ठीक है, जिसके अंदर सारे प्रोविंसेस, सारे स्टेट्स होंगे. लेकिन the idea here was, was not accepted because the Muslim League was wanting something else. तो अब इसके अंदर इन्होंने कहा कि ठीक है आप डोमिनियन स्टेटस रख लीजिए, आप अपने लोगों के थ्रू कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन भी बना लो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली से, और वन इंडिया की हम बात करते हैं. हाउएवर अगर कोई प्रोविंस है, मान लो देयर इज सम प्रोविंस, हम उसकी भी आपको हेल्प दे देंगे. द क्रिप्स मिशन सेड कि इन केस इफ देयर इज एनी पर्टिकुलर प्रोविंस इन द कंट्री हु इज नॉट रेडी टू एक्सेप्ट द इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन एंड विश टू हैव इट्स ओन इंडिपेंडेंस, if there is any province in the country which want to retain its constitutional provision which was at the time, and they do not wish to accede to India, तो फिर उसके अंदर हम उनके साथ सेपरेट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अग्रीमेंट्स या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अरेंजमेंट्स भी कर सकते हैं. बट ऐसा हुआ ही नहीं. ऑफ कोर्स the Indian National Congress and Muslim League, I think the Britishers also knew here that these two parties would never come on to agreement on these points which were proposed by the Crips Mission. ठीक है, अब actually में why did these parties did not agree to this particular idea of Crips Mission was, these parties actually wanted a separate, or I would rather say the the saying, अब क्यों क्रिप्स मिशन में दो पार्टीज के बीच में agreement नहीं हुई, there was no agreement between the parties and they did not accept the proposal because the league wanted two autonomous states. Separate states means separate countries which will be based on communal lines, ठीक है, और उन्होंने बोला एक मुस्लिम स्टेट होगा और एक हिंदू मेजॉरिटी स्टेट होगा, एंड वी नीड अ सेपरेट डिमांड ऑन पाकिस्तान. दिस वाज अर्ज्ड. सेकेंडली, उन्होंने कहा कि अब जब दो कंट्रीज हो रही हैं तो देयर शैल बी टू कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट assemblies. Okay, now this of course was not, accepted. अब ये चीज इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस को एक्सेप्टेड नहीं थी, एंड क्रिप्स मिशन फेल्ड. So the proposal of the Crips mission, or the Crips proposal, they were rejected. Okay, इसके बाद इंडिया में क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट हुई, एंड इट वाज अ लार्जर कैंपेन. ठीक है, quit India movement हुई, that okay, we are not agreeing to your proposal, but still you need to get out of our country. Okay, still और attempts होते रहे. There were attempts to bring on these two parties together. जैसे शिमला कॉन्फ्रेंस हुई, at the instance of the गवर्नर जनरल लॉर्ड वेवल. तो वेवल जो थे उस टाइम इंडिया के गवर्नर जनरल थे. they thought कि let's bring these two parties together and let's call them to Shimla. So they were called at Shimla. This is known as the Shimla conference. but वो भी फेल हो गई. ब्रिटिश कैबिनेट ने उसके बाद इंडिया में भेजा. ओके, सो दिस वाज, इसके बाद हुई शिमला कॉन्फ्रेंस to bring parties together on demand of Wavell. Okay, demand of Lord Wavell. But this also failed. Then अब ब्रिटेन में सब क्रिप्स मिशन वापस चला गया. ब्रिटेन पार्लियामेंट थॉट कि भाई ये तो हमारा काम बन ही नहीं रहा है. नाउ व्हाट शैल वी डू? सो ultimately, when it did not succeed, but the struggle for India, or the struggle of India to ask for its independence continued. Now, of course, that is why the Quit India movement happened. So after the Crips mission went back in 1946, okay, the Britain Parliament sent 3 people with another proposal. Okay, sent 3 people with another proposal. That proposal is known as the Cabinet Mission Plan. Right? अब ये क्या था कि भाई अब इन्होंने जाके बताया वहां पे कि भाई यहाँ पे तो द पार्टीज अपने में ही नहीं बन रही है. फ्रीडम फाइटर्स एक दूसरे से ही लड़ाई करे जा रहे हैं, तो ये अपना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन क्या बनाएंगे, हम इनको कैसे इंडिपेंडेंट बनाएं, हाउ डू वी आस्क देम टू सेल्फ गवर्न देमसेल्व्स. ये लोग तो एक दूसरे से लड़ाई जा रहे हैं. So they went back to London and they told the British government about all these things. So bhai, the British government decided that we need to address this political deadlock, and we need to give them a framework. तो हमें कुछ करना पड़ेगा. और इन्होंने 3 लोगों को, which was known as the Cabinet Mission Plan, 3 members from the British cabinet were sent to India. इसको कैबिनेट मिशन प्लान क्यों कहते हैं? बिकॉज ऑल दीज 3 वर कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर्स, जिसमें से जो स्टैनफोर्ड क्रिप्स है, जो क्रिप्स मिशन लेके आया था, वो भी इसमें आया. क्रिप्स आया, ठीक है. इसके बाद लॉरेंस, पेट्रिक लॉरेंस आया, एंड द थर्ड पर्सन वाज एवी अलेक्जेंडर. अब ये तीनों इंडिया आते हैं. इनका क्या ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि भाई इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस और मुस्लिम लीग में कोई तो सोल्यूशन निकले, थोड़ी तो सुलह हो जाए. their egos, somewhere we will settle down their egos, we will try to accommodate their demands, but there was nothing that helped. तो इन लोगों के साथ क्या प्लान था कि भाई we will create united India. Okay, plan was united India बनाएंगे. Okay, who will be having a constitution of its own, but we will give safeguards. Okay, they tried to give assurance to Muslim League that we will give safeguards to minorities. We will give you political representation. We will safeguard your rights. Okay, so this was all told to the Muslim League. So when we are speaking of generally the features of the cabinet mission plan, when we are speaking of the features of cabinet mission plan 1946, तो हम इसमें दो चार चीजें देखते हैं. So first is said कि भाई we will have a union of India, कि you need to settle down your egos, you need to settle down your disputes, both you parties, and we need to have a union of India which will consist of the British India and the princely states. ठीक है, इस union of India में एक central government होगी which will be responsible for defense, foreign affairs, communications, and other things. Other governance will be done by the the provinces. They will have federal structure, and they will be autonomous to look after other affairs, their internal affairs, and the central government will see affairs like defense, foreign needs, and the communications. उसके बाद we will group provinces. They will do grouping of provinces कि भाई इतने सारे kingdoms हैं, you need to bring out together everybody, you need to bring together everyone, so you need to bring these provinces also together. So आप provinces को group करो, group the provinces, group the kingdoms on the basis of their geographical proximity. Then जब तक आपका constitution नहीं बन जाता, we'll give you an interim government. Okay, so interim government will be formed at the center, which will have representatives from all the different political parties. Okay, and the British government will transfer its authority to the government, and this particular government, जो कि नई बनी है, interim government बनी है, will work to make new constitution. Okay. Or last thing कि भाई we are also concerned about minorities. We are also concerned about minority rights, and we are concerned about minority rights means particularly Muslims, and कि अगर कोई ऐसा state है, कोई ऐसा province है जो नहीं ये ग्रुप के कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के साथ जाना चाहता, do not accept it, they are free to have a separate referendum to decide their own future. So this was the idea. But these negotiations, these discussions between the political parties, जो कि कैबिनेट मिशन प्लान प्रोवाइड करना चाह रहा था, एक म्यूचुअली अग्रीएबल सॉल्यूशन, इसको बहुत ज्यादा पार्टीज से opposition मिला और disagreement मिला. ठीक है, including the two major political parties, Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, जिन्होंने actually में you can say it led to failure of the cabinet mission plan to be implemented. तो ये हो ही नहीं पाया implement. Now, what were the reasons for its failure? Why did the cabinet mission plan actually failed? Why? ये क्योंकि भाई बहुत सारे फैक्टर्स हैं. एक तो डिसएग्रीमेंट्स हैं, पॉलिटिकल डिसएग्रीमेंट्स हैं, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स मैच नहीं हो रहे हैं. देन देयर इज there's a lot of division and deep rooted division under among the Indian political leaders. So some of them, if I have to point out here, can be कि सबसे ज्यादा तो इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस और मुस्लिम लीग के डिफरेंसेस. ओके, ये आना ही नहीं चाहते किसी सेटलमेंट के ऊपर, तो भाई क्या आप इनकी हेल्प कर लोगे? They were seeing different vision for future of India. Congress wanted a united India with a strong central government. Muslim League, demanded separate nations for Muslims. और इनके फंडामेंटल आइडियाज में ही सबसे ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम थी कंसेंसस में पहुंचने में. उसके बाद कम्युनल टेंशंस. At this point of time, India was seeing a lot of riots and a lot of hatred between Muslims and Hindus. Okay, though the cabinet mission plan wanted to address this, the CMP wanted to address this, or address the communal concerns कि भाई हम provinces को group together कर देंगे, we will give protection to the minority rights, but it actually failed to satisfy the demands of the communities, or rather इसने further increase kar di tensions. Okay, it led to more chaos, and in fact it led to more non faith between the parties. Third thing, the princely states. The princely states जो है भाई, अब आप इनको इंक्लूड तो करना चाहते हो, बट ये इंक्लूड नहीं होना चाहते. ठीक है, अब कैबिनेट मिशन प्लान जो है वो एक फेडरेटेड इंडिया की बात कर रहा था, विच विल रिक्वायर द पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ प्रिंसली स्टेट्स. अब प्रिंसली स्टेट्स के खुद के एस्पिरेशंस थे कि भाई जब इंडिपेंडेंस मिलेगा क्या पता हम एक अलग ही सेपरेट कंट्री या नेशन बन जाए, ठीक है, या फिर we will also have to see something good for our own self. So they didn't wish to actually join United India. They had their own aspirations for autonomy and different interests, and they were reluctant, to join this particularly complicated plan. And finally, there was no agreement, lack of agreement. So no consensus was reached between the political parties. Okay, the crucial issues on future governance and the crucial issues like what will be the structure of India, how will we be governed, so they were still entrenched in their respective positions, and they were not able to reach at a common ground. So these can be said as few of the reasons. Finally, Britain के अपने खुद के इंटरेस्ट भी थे, British interests. Now, what can be the interests of the Britishers here? Okay, the British government, which was a colonial power, what were its own concerns and interests? The Britishers wanted a smooth transfer of power. ठीक है कि भाई रीजन में उनके क्रिएट ना करते. So these factors also affected their approach in negotiating this settlement. Okay, now all these otherwise people अगर बाद में independence हो भी जाता है तो still be colonies. Okay, so they didn't actually wish to align with anybody. Neither they wish to align with Indian National Congress, neither they wish to align with the Muslim League. So they were actually looking at कि भाई ये power of transfer हम लोग ही ना फंस जाए, we shouldn't be be the center of attraction, और हम लोगों के ऊपर कोई problem ना create होनी पड़े. However, the failure that happened of the cabinet mission plan, this failure led to further discussions, further negotiations, and the partition did take place, and independent Pakistan was actually born. The next thing that becomes prime in here is after the cabinet mission plan, that is the Mountbatten plan. Okay, the Mountbatten plan of 1947. Now the Mountbatten plan of 1947 क्या है भाई? अब इसको हम plan of transfer of power भी कहते हैं. It is also known as a plan of transfer of power, the Mountbatten plan. Kyun? Because this, why is it Mountbatten plan? The name is because it was forwarded by the last Viceroy of India. This becomes an important question. Who was the last Viceroy of India? He was the Lord Louis Mountbatten. So for June 1947 में he actually proposed this official idea of what will be the plan of transferring of power. So by this time the Britishers had also accepted that there will be no settlement between these two parties, there will be no smoothing of the deadlock, there will be no mutual agreement, and they had understood that it was necessary in that particular situation to separate the country into two dominions, that is India and Pakistan. ठीक है, तो अब इस प्लान के अंदर क्या है, सी वी आर ओनली स्पीकिंग ऑफ अ प्लान हियर, ये कोई एक्ट नहीं है, ये बात याद रखना, क्योंकि आगे हम एक एक्ट पढ़ेंगे जो इससे थोड़ा सा सिमिलर होगा। अब प्लान क्या बता रहा है, ये टाइमलाइन बता रहा है। क्या टाइमलाइन बता रहा है? पार्टीशन की, ओके। और किसकी टाइमलाइन बता रहा है? कि भाई प्रोसेस ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस की। Rather, I would say it is giving a deadline कि भाई 15th अगस्त 1947 तक सारा पावर will be transferred from British to India. Okay, this is what the plan was actually speaking of. When we speak of its its objectives and its functions, हम इसके objectives और functions को point out कर सकते हैं। The objectives and functions are, first objective तो transfer of power ही है, Mountbatten plan, okay, transfer of power है। अब ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर का मतलब क्या हुआ कि भाई दिस प्लान एम्ड टू फैसिलिटेट power from British rule to Indian hands, कि भाई this will bring an end to the British colonial rule in India, end of British rule in India, okay, ये फंक्शन है। दूसरा फंक्शन क्या है कि पार्टीशन होगा, ठीक है, पार्टीशन होगा एंड वी आर एग्रीइंग फॉर सेपरेट नेशन, कि अब जो इंडिया है, ब्रिटिश इंडिया को दो डोमिनियंस में डिवाइड कर दिया जाएगा, इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान। डोमिनियन ऑफ, डोमिनियन से इस बारे में याद रखना कि डोमिनियन मतलब दे डू नॉट हैव अ रिपब्लिक, they have alliance to the British Commonwealth here, ठीक है। और जब पार्टीशन हो जाएगा तो फिर हम कम्युनल टेंशंस और जो भी रॉयट्स और ये सब चीजें हो रही हैं, जो आगे ज्यादा वायलेंस हो रहा है, हम उसको भी एड्रेस करने की कोशिश करेंगे। वील एड्रेस कम्युनल टेंशंस, and we'll give a solution to that. Then, like I said in the last page, कि भाई it gave a deadline, तो इसने एक पर्टिकुलर एक्सेलरेट करने के लिए प्रोसेस ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस को एक डिसाइडेड टाइमलाइन दी, टाइमलाइन which give a deadline of 15th August 1947, ठीक है, कि भाई 15th अगस्त 1947 तक इस टाइम में ट्रांसफर हो जाना चाहिए पावर, पार्टीशन हो जाना चाहिए और ये प्लान इम्प्लीमेंट हो जाना चाहिए, ठीक है। इसके अलावा ये तो इसके ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हैं, व्हाट कैन बी द फंक्शंस। अब व्हेन यू विल हैव टू पार्टीशन टू मेजर कंट्रीज, यू विल हैव टू डिसाइड हु विल गेट व्हाट, ठीक है। सो आपके फंक्शंस जो थे, द प्लान aim to have these functions. Functions of the Mountbatten plan were कि you will set up or demarcate the boundary. You will demarcate the boundary and इसका काम ये जो है सिरिल रैडक्लिफ को दिया। Cyril Radcliffe was given the work to demarcate the boundaries and he will decide what will be the borders between India and Pakistan, और borders बनाने के लिए geographically demography को check करने के लिए, ये determine करने के लिए he will take things like religious demographics, geographical conditions he'll take into consideration, administrative viability he'll take into consideration. Then the function was they were only also supposed to part the assets, partition of assets and resources, okay, ये भी function था। Mountbatten plan, matlab this plan wanted to have all these things when the power was supposedly to be transferred. Citizenship, migration, क्योंकि अब ट्रांसफर होगा, पार्टीशन होगा, तो ऑफ कोर्स पीपल विल मूव फ्रॉम वन प्लेस टू अदर. दैट व्हाट राइट विल दीज पीपल हैव टू चूज देयर नेशनैलिटी. तो अपनी रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी के बेसिस पे दे विल हैव राइट टू चूज देयर नेशनैलिटी ईदर इन इंडिया और इन पाकिस्तान. और फिर सारे अरेंजमेंट्स जो कि सेफ्टी या ऑर्डरली ट्रांसफर ऑफ पॉपुलेशन के थे वो सब बनाए जाएंगे. देन फाइनली पावर विल बी ट्रांसफर्ड. अब ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर मतलब एक गाइडलाइन दो कि भाई ब्रिटिश से न्यू गवर्नमेंट को आपने पावर सौंप दिया. ठीक है, तो इसके अंदर क्या होगा, विच विल प्रोवाइड फॉर डिसोल्यूशन ऑफ ब्रिटिश रूल and transfer of administrative control. ठीक है, so I would rather say कि जो Mountbatten plan है, it was a plan, okay, it was not an act. So this Mountbatten plan had a crucial role in shaping the partition of India. And इसके बाद जो है इंडिपेंडेंट इंडिया एंड इंडिपेंडेंट पाकिस्तान वाज सेट अप. और इसका एम था कि भाई जो भी ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर है उसको एक्सपेडाइट करना और जो कम्युनल टेंशंस हैं उसको रिड्यूस करना, so that mass migrations can happen smoothly, and violence or communal violence which was happening around can actually settle down and it does not happen. Okay, अब इसके बाद आता है एक्ट कि चलो भाई डेडलाइन ग्रांट कर दी, इंडिया को इंडिपेंडेंस मिल गया. At stroke of midnight, when the world sleeps, India will awake independence. Okay, tries to a destiny की जो speech है जवाहरलाल नेहरू की is a famous one. So now finally India become an independent nation in 1947. तो एक इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट है 1947 का. पहला वाला प्लान था, उसको लीगल सैंक्शन नहीं है, ये एक्ट है, मतलब ये लॉ है. ठीक है, वो माउंटबैटन प्लान लॉ नहीं है. माउंटबैटन प्लान वाज प्रपोज्ड बाय लॉर्ड माउंटबैटन. ओके, दिस इज एन एक्ट ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट ऑफ यूनाइटेड किंगडम कि भाई ये लॉ में बोल दिया. अब इसको इन्होंने वही सारी बातों को कि भाई इंडिया पाकिस्तान will be partitioned, they will be independent from British India, and they will be two separate dominions. So this was actually said or wrote down as law. So this law provides independence मिल गई. ठीक है, partition हो गया, and two separate nations or dominions rather, not nations, two separate dominions, India and Pakistan ban gaye. Okay, now if we have to see the objectives of the Indian Independence Act, अब इसके objectives वही हैं जो माउंटबैटन प्लान के थे कि इंडिपेंडेंस ग्रांट करना, पार्टीशन को फैसिलिटेट, टेरिटरीज की डिवीजन करना, बस उन सब चीजों को इसने लॉ के फॉर्म में डाल दिया. मतलब बाउंड हो गए. Okay, you are supposed to do it, you are supposed to execute it. So it was actually aiming to execute Mountbatten plan was executed by Independence of India Act IIA 1947. इसने माउंटबैटन प्लान को execute किया. ठीक है, उसके अलावा ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर के अलावा क्या है कि भाई डोमिनियन बना रहे हो तो फिर तुम्हारे पास कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली होंगी जो अपना अपना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनाएंगी. ठीक है, देन आपके पास एक गवर्नर जनरल होंगे. ठीक है, तो लॉर्ड माउंटबैटन जो है वो इंडिया के पहले गवर्नर जनरल बने और मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना जो है वो पाकिस्तान के फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल बने। और जो भी सेपरेट कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबलीज हैं वो अपना अपना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का काम करने लगी। ओके, तो इस एक्ट ने, इस लॉ ने एग्जीक्यूट किया विच वाज प्रपोज्ड बाय द माउंटबैटन प्लान। ठीक है, all those things like independence, like partition, like the dominion status, like the citizenship, minority rights, financial arrangements, sari cheezein. So we can say what is the difference or what is the main idea of Indian Independence Act is कि उसने legal foundation दी, partition को legal foundation दी। किसने? इस एक्ट ने पार्टीशन को लीगल फाउंडेशन दी इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट में फॉर क्रिएटिंग इंडिपेंडेंट इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान। while it granted independence, it also resulted, however, a lot of violence and mass migrations. Even after I would rather say settlement of partition, or accepting two dominion state theory, the violence at the time of partition did not stop. To know more ki bhai kis tarah ka violence tha, you can read, there are a number of books which actually tries to portray what had happened at the time of partition of India. For example, this book Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Sinha elaborately tries to explain the incidents which had happened, and the kind of problems which people suffered, or what was the situation at that time rather. ठीक है, तो लास्ट थिंग जो मैं इसमें अब बात करूंगी कि भाई इन दोनों के बीच में डिफरेंस आप किस तरह से कह सकते हैं, क्या है, what is the difference, because देखने में ये दोनों सेम ही लग रहे हैं कि they are interconnected to each other, but one is a law, one is just a plan, it is a proposal. ठीक है, so we'll just quickly wrap up the class with understanding the differences between Mountbatten Plan and the Indian Independence Act. Mountbatten Plan and Indian Independence Act 1947. Okay, क्या क्या है? अब सबसे पहला है कि भाई ये जो है दोनों 1947 के ही हैं ये दोनों। अब माउंटबैटन प्लान जो है, और द प्लान ऑफ ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर, और द प्लान ऑफ 1947, इट वाज अ प्रपोजल। I will wait. It was a proposal, ठीक है, which was put forwarded by Lord Mountbatten, who is the last viceroy. ठीक है, ये इसने प्रपोज किया था, और इसका एम क्या था कि भाई इश्यूज रिलेटिंग टू address issues relating to India's independence, okay, and partition on religious lines. ठीक है, ये जो है प्रपोजल नहीं है, ये एक्ट है, इसको ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट ने पास किया। ओके, इट इज अ लीगल फ्रेमवर्क। ओके, दिस लीगल फ्रेमवर्क, यहाँ पे इश्यूज एड्रेस हो रहे हैं अबाउट इंडिपेंडेंस, अबाउट पार्टीशन। ओके, इसने ग्रांट कर दिया, granted independence. So this particular legal framework, the Indian Independence Act, granted independence to India and Pakistan, and it gives a legal basis. It gives a legal basis for partition. Fine. दोनों के ऑब्जेक्टिव्स में थोड़ी बहुत इंटरकनेक्शन है, आई अग्री. तो जो लॉर्ड माउंटबैटन प्लान है, इट हैज एन आउटलाइन और गिव अ प्रोसीजर और गिव अ टाइमलाइन फॉर ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर फ्रॉम ब्रिटिश टू इंडियन हैंड्स. इट प्रपोज्ड कि भाई पार्टीशन होगा इनटू टू सेपरेट डोमिनियंस एंड इट विल बी बेस्ड ऑन रिलीजियस डेमोग्राफिक्स, जो कि एक्ट है 1947 का इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट. इट एम्स टू गिव अ लीगल फ्रेमवर्क कि भाई दे हैव बिकम इंडिपेंडेंट सॉवरेन स्टेट्स, ओके, बट नॉट रिपब्लिक येट. रिपब्लिक ये दोनों तब बने जब इनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन आ गया, ओके. और इन्होंने इसमें बताया द एक्ट प्रोवाइडेड फॉर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अरेंजमेंट्स, division of territories and other provisions which might have been necessary for their independence. Now, अब ये दोनों को अपनी रोल और इनको अपनी अथॉरिटी कहाँ से मिलती है? जो माउंटबैटन प्लान है, it was proposed, of course, the role and authority was the viceroy himself. ठीक है, it was a plan for negotiations. This was a proposal for negotiations. It was a proposal for negotiations between political leaders. Indian Independence Act जो है, it held the authority, the legislative authority in Britain to give independence. So वो executory है उसका function, उसका एक legal framework है. It grants independence, that speaks of independence, that provides for a plan about negotiation. ठीक है, तो जो इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एक्ट है, इट हैज अ फोर्स ऑफ लॉ. द माउंटबैटन प्लान डज नॉट हैव अ फोर्स ऑफ लॉ. इट इज जस्ट अ प्रपोजल. ठीक है, इट डज नॉट हैव अ लीगल स्टैंडिंग द वे द एक्ट ऑफ पार्लियामेंट हैज. Okay, it just facilitated discussions and negotiations. However, the Indian Independence Act is a formal legal enactment which was made by the parliament, and it provides legal basis for the partition of the country, for partition of India, about transfer of power, about establishment of two separate dominions, India, Pakistan, as independent nations. ठीक है, तो if I have to summarize, so I would rather say कि भाई these all milestones, starting from, I would say, the this particular revolt of 1857, the first war of independence, उसके बाद आपका नेहरू रिपोर्ट और the Calcutta session, then coming into existence of the Crips Mission, sending Stanford Crips to India, its failure of not able to bring out political parties in consensus, then they going back, and after few years at the time of after the World War, when the Crips mission failed, sending a cabinet mission plan to India to decide ki of course now we will have to have separate two nations. So these things, the Mountbatten plan followed by the Indian Independence Act, all these things together, they comprise to be important key I would say landmarks or key milestones in understanding the history or the making of the Indian Constitution. Okay, so we will stop here today, and tomorrow I shall take up things like what all things have we borrowed from various different countries, or how our constitution has derived few things from different places in the world and have modified them to their own situation. Are there any new things that we have created which were nowhere to be found in the world? How the Government of India Act has acted as a base or a major broad guiding principles are mentioned in the Government of India Act, which act a base for creation of the Indian Constitution, and the features that we have borrowed. So we will wind up here today, and I hope you are reading after you go back from the classes as well. And thank you for being there in time, and see you again tomorrow. That's all. Thank you and have a nice day. Good evening, everybody. See you again.